Good, excellent. So without further ado, that leaves me passing over to Jo and to Sophie from Basingstoke College of Technology. Go for it.
Hello everyone, can you hear us okay? And can you see the presentation okay as well? Hey, that's always a good sign. One second, there we are. All right, let's get going. So as you can see, our project was about using technology to motivate and engage GCSE maths learners. So hi everyone, I'm Joe Wodrinski, a lecturer in maths at FE College in Basingstoke. I have a previous background in technology and media, and I've always tried to incorporate innovation and technology within my teaching practice.
And I'm Sophie George. I've been a maths lecturer for 4 years. This year I took on the role of course director for GCSE Maths. I'm incredibly passionate about breaking down barriers for learning maths, as I was a resit GCSE Maths learner myself.
We're hopeful that whatever your experience is with teaching and technology, that you could take something useful away from what we focused our research on. This year, we analysed different software packages and the effectiveness of these with our demographic of learner. The project's focus was all about progressing our practice and improving the learner experience.
Doing the project over a year of mostly teaching remotely really helped us perfect our digital provision. The learners made some fantastic progress and learnt valuable lessons in regards to technology. However, it wasn't just our students that benefited from our research. The teaching team have also significantly grown in confidence towards all things digital.
These are the topics that we're going to discuss. We'll try and be brief in detail due to time constraints, but please do check out our project report, appendices and various publications to get a greater understanding of what we've achieved this year. Mastery of the Google Suite, student digital fluency, staff digital confidence, and lastly, looking forward to the next academic year. So first up, we're going to look at the Google Suite. We've used it at the college for a number of years now. I'm going to go through how we adapted Docs and Google Forms as well throughout the project to become essential features of our curriculum. So firstly, Google Docs. It was initially one of the main focuses of the project. The benefits of Docs vary from having a live synchronous document to also being able to ascertain when, how long for, and how much work a learner has contributed throughout a lesson, whether in lesson or outside of the lesson as well. An issue we had right at the beginning though was the format. As you can see, I have a maths question for the area of a circle. I thought that learners would like a designated place to put their working out as well as their answers, rather than lose the text behind a photo or somewhere else undesirable on a document. I thought that they could leave their contributions as a comment. Therefore, the document's integrity is secured. What I didn't expect was how difficult learners would find this. It was a valuable lesson in the experience of behalf and regards of the project, and ensuring that we keep everything inclusive as well as accessible for all of the learners. So instead, I devised a designated place for learners to put their working out and their answers. This was much simpler, so that learners took to it straight away. This also provides learners with a uniformed workbook. And also, we want to give feedback to the learners. As you can see here with the font in green, it's easily located for the learners as well. But lots of positive feedback from the learners about our digital workbooks. And we're going to use this method going ahead next year for both digital and paper-based workbooks. But Sophie will go through these in a bit more detail later on.
In addition to using Docs, another tool that Google provides is the marking tool Rubrics. It makes marking digitally very quick and precise. A member of the maths team learned how to use it and fed this back to us. Here is how you design mark allocation. As you can see on this assessment, we have the answered questions on the left that we can scan through, then award the correct mark to each question. The design is simple and easy for both learners and teacher. We then can afford time to focus on pinpointing areas that learners need to focus on. Another bonus of using rubrics is that it ensures marking is standardised. This was beneficial for team members who were not as confident with marking.
We use Google Forms as an assessment tool. This was always with the intention of assessing learners' progress in that lesson's topics. Each assessment is self-marking and shared in the lesson's Google Classroom. Here's what one of our tickets developed to look like. This is like a question that can be found on one of those assessments. Learners answer these questions like this. Notice that if needed, we can embed Equatio, another digital tool that is designed to be used specifically for maths notation online. If asking learners to answer by any means other than multiple choice, for example, it is imperative that you ask or get ready for all the possible answers a learner may use, although learners still find ways to answer a question in a way that I wouldn't have thought would have been possible. Forms offers many different types of data that we can analyse, both live as well as after the lesson. For example, average overall scores, percentage of questions answered, and pie charts of learner confidence. Another part of Forms that came into good use throughout the project when analysing data was the ability to quickly establish which questions learners are struggling with. As you can see here, we've got questions that the learners might have skipped or that they found incorrect, and I can quickly establish how many of each. I can see what answers were given by the whole cohort at a quick glance to try and identify patterns, and I populate this data onto a formally prepared spreadsheet to quickly compare results between learners that took part in the project and the rest of the cohort. I can't stress how much Forms helped with research analysis in terms of quantitative data. We asked our learners to take many surveys throughout the year. Some of the results were surprising, but always informative. Here's some examples of our headline data. Or feedback, I should say. We're especially proud of the last statement. Given learners' opinion at the start of the year compared to that at the end of the year, it shows the impact that we made. We've also had some wonderful learner feedback during the project, getting learners to get on side to appreciate what we're doing and why it had many beneficial outcomes. Here's some of the feedback we've received as well. Here's a short video from one of our case studies.
At the very beginning, I felt I was not very good, not very confident, and not willing to experiment and try new things. And throughout the year, I become slowly more confident, more willing to experiment, try new things, develop. I've been developing. So I used to be one of those people that wasn't a technical geek, wouldn't bother about technology, wasn't very confident with technology. As time's got going on, I'm slowly getting more confident. I've gotten to the point now that I've gone and bought myself a new laptop, a new Chromebook, and I use it on day-to-day life, and it's handy because it's the same software that we use at college.
What the project has done for the team's confidence. The project really allowed us to focus and gave us a great starting point. From these beginnings, the team were able to springboard ideas, and this organically grew over our time in lockdown. Highlights and pivotal points are the use of how we develop the Google Docs, our ability to use them in real time, and also use Google Chat to discuss directly with learners whilst they were working on maths problems. This was a real success, as this enabled us to see if learners were engaged online. We were also able to see which learners were not engaged. When we went into remote teaching, we had the advantage of having already started the project. So this enabled us as a team to have a focus and a partial understanding of what worked. However, we could not have anticipated what this would have led to. All of the team helped each other. We met regularly. Joe especially enjoyed the early morning meetings, which we did actually change. Meeting regularly allowed the team to be prepared for any challenges ahead, and also allowed for any concerns or worries to be discussed. I myself found this useful, and this allowed me to not feel alone whilst we were remote. Here is a short video of two of our team members talking about the impact this year has had on their practice.
While I've genuinely felt accountability with technology, I feel that this year has opened my eyes to how digital resources can be so beneficial in streamlining our usual processes, as well as opening the door for more collaborative working. I completely agree with Tom on this, in which I feel that our collaborative working and problem solving allowed us to deliver challenging topics in some creative digital formats, which allowed our work to be both accessible to learners and also allow the continued quality of learning for.
This, for me, assessments was a pivotal point of the project. We've been using Google Forms for a couple of years as exit tickets. In the past, when we found a topic that was difficult to digitalise, we would print onto paper. This was not an option whilst we were remote, so we had to devise ways of using Google Forms entirely. We had found that in our remote lessons, learners who did not engage on docs would always complete the exit ticket at the end of the lesson. We teach once a week and cover a large amount of content in 2.5 hours. Joe suggested that as the exit tickets were easily accessed, that we could turn these into topic tickets. This, for me, is one of the most pivotal shifts in the process. We stopped using forms as exit tickets at the end and instead use them as topic tickets as an assessment tool to check ability. Learners were also able to get instant feedback from this, and this informed us for future planning. Having topic tickets allowed the lesson to have key active participation points for learners. They were able to see how they had got on with a particular topic, and the process was quick, at 3 or 4 questions per ticket, which allowed for an upbeat pace, something which is hard to achieve remotely. Through our growing confidence, we looked outside of the box to continuously create topic tickets fully digitally.
Going to move ahead quickly.
30 seconds, Joe.
Yeah, sorry, we're running out of
Just say our next steps.
Yeah.
So we're going to continue to be reflective practitioners. We cannot ever underestimate the importance of this. Digital learning is no longer an add-on feature in lessons, but a core aspect. We are extending our use of videos in the curriculum, and topic tickets will continue to be used fully digitally throughout the next academic year.
Thanks for watching, everyone. If you have any questions, please do ask away. Any questions left in the chat, we'll try and get to answering those as quickly as possible. Please do check out our project if you're interested and you want to read more about it.
Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Sophie. Sorry to have to hurry you. It's just such a crammed schedule. There's plenty of questions in chat and lots of affirmation for the video of the wonderful twins, and also your Joe didn't enjoy early mornings gif. Everyone's loved. So pop on to chat and give those questions and compliments from everyone a check, while I ask Lee and Karen from Bishop Burton and Riseholme to fire up their presentation.
And while they're doing that, can I ask whoever is iPad to put your name in? Otherwise, I'm afraid I will have to remove you because of safeguarding. So please put your name in because I don't know who you are. Thank you.
I'm going to hand over to you, Lee and Karen. It's all yours.
Right, I'll unmute myself and I'll try again. So we pre-recorded ours because I talk too much. Let me get back to the beginning. Stop video. Oh, no. Heck. Need to get back to the beginning. There we go. Right, try again.
Can't hear it.
No, we're
might
not.
have shared your sound.
There is any. I don't know if you shared sound. You might need to come out of share, Lee, and back in and just tick the little box down to the bottom left, which is share audio.
Right. Oh, there we go. So this is why we need you, Lynn. Try again. A lot of twists.
My name is Karen. I work at Bishop Burton campus with our apprentices.
Our project has taken a lot of twists and turns over the last year, mostly due to having to adapt to the pandemic and working remotely. We planned on focusing on the technology we were using in maths to help our learners and to compare the methods and pedagogy used between the apprentices and the main 16 to 19 cohort to see if we could learn from each other about what works best. We looked at 3 areas: Century, an online learning platform with artificial intelligence; Microsoft Teams for when we were teaching remotely; and Microsoft Forms as an assessment tool. All had pros and cons because our learners are not a one-size-fits-all, but we did identify a couple of significant differences when using all 3 for teaching. We combined Teams with Microsoft Forms for the online teaching sessions. The 16 to 19-year-olds were taught using Microsoft Forms as an assessment of their prior knowledge at the start of the lesson, followed by using the interactive whiteboard in Microsoft Teams to show worked examples with a progress assessment at the end of the lesson, again on Microsoft Forms. Questioning was done using the main chat, with anxious learners using the private chat to join in without fear. This function significantly increased the confidence levels in my learners. One in particular would not engage in class, but online he started answering in the private chat, then moved to the main chat, and finally increasing confidence to show his working out on the interactive whiteboard. This was an unexpected positive of online teaching.
Apprentices overall remained working, and in many cases employers expected a much more flexible working time from them. This meant that normal timetabling wouldn't work for all of my apprentices, so I developed an on-demand timetable. Apprentices let me know via email when they had spare time in the working week, and I set up a one-to-one Teams lesson with them around their timetable. This was arranged days in advance, but equally, it was often arranged within an hour, half an hour. Several smaller taught sessions over the week, rather than one full session, received really good feedback from both learners and employers. The only negative aspect of this was more teaching hours for me, but that was far outweighed by the increased learner engagement.
In the 16 to 19 cohort, Century was used at an allocated time within the learner timetable as independent study, whilst the apprentices used it as a consolidation tool with a more focused and tailored approach. The data in the report will show that although the overall performance of 16 to 19-year-olds and apprentices was good, and there wasn't much difference in scores between the 2 cohorts, the confidence levels were a lot higher in the apprentices when using Century. Learners have commented on it being due to them knowing what to do because they have completed tasks and received support in their lessons. The 16 to 19-year-olds had set timetables and were attending 2 face-to-face sessions with 1 online session. This meant that they knew exactly what they were doing, when they were doing it, and where they needed to be.
Apprentices used Century as a consolidation for the one-to-one and group sessions. They could access Century at any time, and this removed some of the negativity around online learning, as the learners had the option to choose where and when they completed the work. Based on the scores they achieved, I was able to determine whether to repeat work or move on the learner onto the next topic. Overall, the apprentices didn't really like to use Century to learn a topic, but were much more open to using it in the consolidation at the end of taught sessions. As most of the apprentices continued to work, isolation was not a main concern, although it still needed to be monitored carefully. A few minutes at the beginning of every lesson to ask learners, "How are you today? What did you do yesterday?" made for a more relaxed class, and in some cases allowed learners to speak about any concerns they may have been facing. The beginning of online learning, a lot of my lessons felt like I was more holding a séance than a lesson. Is anyone there? Can anyone hear me? This could have been a combination of learners not being confident with the format of online learning, or may have been embarrassed about the surroundings. All of this was slowly overcome, and in most cases, both cameras and microphones were used in all lessons. This allowed me to be able to monitor the learners' physical being and body language alongside their actual learning taking place.
The major bump in the road that shifted our focus completely was the lockdown and how this affected our learners. Mental well-being of our learners has always been a priority and a natural part of our role as educators, but nothing quite prepares you for the effect that isolation has on young people. College is a place where learners grow and discover new things about themselves, which helps them become comfortable in their own skin, confident with who they are, and form positive bonds with new people. Lockdown meant that they were no longer able to socialise and see their friends and had to attend lessons online. This presented new challenges. Attendance dropped. Parents and carers needed help with younger siblings or needed help around the liveries and farm, or learners had to share laptops with siblings so couldn't always attend at their set time. When the learners were attending, cameras were often off or the learners did not talk, so engagement dropped significantly. It also became much more difficult to read the room. We now had to find new ways to not only engage our learners, but to monitor their mental health too. In the lessons with 16 to 19-year-olds, it was acknowledging that silence was an indicator of a drop in mood. I tested their engagement by asking a question that I knew they could answer. I gauged their response time, if any response was made at all, and then I made the decision to either move forward with the lesson or take a break. The break was not maths-related at all. It was a Disney Kahoot. A question such as, what's getting you through lockdown? What made you laugh out loud this week? What are we all having to eat tonight? Who wants to show us their pet? Anything to get them talking, engaging, laughing, and coming together as a group. The image you can see before you is some of the work and some of the things that got my students through lockdown.
We both feel it's vital to continue to build on the skills we've learned to help support our learners further. A learner-led and flexible way of teaching has proved a winner for both learners and exam results.
Our conclusion was meant to be about how our learners have engaged and thrived in using technology in maths. The journey we have been on has revealed much, much more. We both feel that we have developed new skills in the holistic approach to teaching. We also feel that our learners have shown us just how much they need both academic and mental health support. We have become adaptable, innovative, and even more empathetic. We discovered a multitude of hidden talents that our learners have, and we have celebrated these within the college. We have shown our own talents in adapting our lessons for online teaching, face-to-face teaching, blended teaching, or top of a field on a tractor teaching. What's more, we have not allowed a global pandemic to stop us doing our jobs and caring about our learners.
We both hope you can take a moment to read through our report. Thank you for listening. Does anyone have any questions?
I'm sure there's lots coming in chat. Thank you so much, Lee and Karen. If anybody can beat top of a field on a tractor teaching, I'd like to see you try. And there's lovely shots of learners' pets and something. So keep an eye on chat, please, both of you, because there's lots of questions and so much affirmation coming in. It's a whistle stop. So we're going across to College of West Anglia to Aga and Carl now. And I can see they're sharing their lovely PowerPoint right away. So I shall reset my clock and away you go. Thank you both.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute initially. Okay, so this is our presentation about our project, which became, rather than just focusing on digital stuff, identifying misconceptions in our learners and also maths anxiety. So a little bit of background, we delivered across 5 campuses, and we always normally deliver across those 5 campuses, but this year, of course, we did remote delivery, and we did that for the entire time. We have about 450 learners doing GCSE resit, around 800 doing functional skills, and we also had some doing A-level and level 3 core maths. So in terms of what we're going to talk about, first focus, which was what I did, which was looking at GCSE research learners with their misconceptions. And I had a little look at types of misconceptions, and I got a couple of examples of stuff that we did in order to try and beat it as well. We've also got our second focus, which is maths anxiety, which we did a survey, and also got a little bit about what we couldn't do what we couldn't do now and what we're going to do next. So first of all, here's some stuff about misconceptions. So started off looking at the digital technologies, and we wanted to know how to assess learning in an online classroom, but found that we could do that quite easily. So we looked at what I did was I looked at quizzes we could use. So I needed a source of useful questions, and what I did was I ended up using diagnosticquestions.com, which gave me a lot of data on misconceptions. So here's an example for one of them. I've got a question on ratio, which, as you can see, most students didn't answer correctly. And here I have another question about fractions. Okay, so the one about ratio is just basically a reading sort of question. If they could read it correctly, they'd get it right. Whereas the one on the fractions addition and what have you is a bit more complex than that. They have to remember they have to do something that isn't just adding things together, because as you can see there, most of their answers, they just add numbers and go like, well, I can just add the numerators. So I looked at some research which said there are two different types of misconceptions. Now, after teaching these two topics, okay, I got these sorts of results. So I got a little bit of improvement, okay. So a similar rate of them were correct, but it did massively reduce one particular wrong answer. The addition of fractions after teaching them, okay, similarly to what it was before, they still kind of just gave the same sort of answers. So I have actually changed the picture there, but they're very similar results. The teaching for that one, I didn't actually aim specifically at misconceptions. Okay, that was just normal teaching. So what I came up with was a procedure that looked something like this. And so I did a session focusing entirely on algebraic simplification. The sort of misconception that I wanted to look at was ones where they did something like this: 2x squared plus x cubed equals 3x to the power of 5. So they're just adding everything together there. They can do it. They can see that x cubed is one of them, but beyond that, there's nothing that we really want happening in there. Now, I gave them a multiple choice question. The correct answer for that was none of the above. And I found that maybe they didn't actually believe that was the correct option, and therefore they had to choose one of the other options they had there. So to deal with this, what I did was some Freya model work. So giving them a definition of what simplification is, getting them to generate an explanation of it, and then giving them some examples of things that could be simplified and some examples of things that couldn't be simplified. I also extended it to ones that could be partially simplified as well. So yeah, learners had to generate their own examples. And then I gave them an end of session quiz, which showed a good amount of progress. Okay, I also did one week later on. Unfortunately, due to our constraints on tags, I wasn't able to give a 1 month retention check, which is a bit of a shame because it would have really shown whether they'd got long-term retention or not. Basically, I got rid of some of those misconceptions. So ones like that one that you see there, where they've gone and multiplied the indices together, they got rid of that sort of thing. But the addition type misconception you see above, that stayed after 1 week. Now, Agra is going to talk to you about maths anxiety.
So I've looked at maths anxiety. I've attended one of the CPD sessions delivered by Sue Johnson-Wilder, who is our maths anxiety researcher. And the things she was saying in there kind of hit home. And I really, really wanted to look at that with other learners. One of the key issues affecting large proportion of learners, especially GCSE learners, is the fact that they need to retake it. So that makes them very, very anxious. So we've decided to link it with this research because Carl was already working on misconceptions. So we wanted to see if there is any link between it. So if maths anxiety happens because of misconceptions, or whether there is misconception happen because of maths anxiety. I've devised a questionnaire this year and distributed it to my and Carl learners. And one of the questions was the one on the screen. So do they know anyone? And interestingly, half of the learners asked said they didn't. So we hear our learners very often say they're anxious about maths. So we wanted to know what this actually means to them. So those are the responses we got. Majority of the learners have described anxiety rather than maths anxiety. These are interconnected, but they're not actually the same thing. We were unable to link it this year, generally because our delivery was online delivery. So some of the things that theory research says is that we need to be able to see the sign of them becoming anxious. Because we were online, the only way for us to know whether they are anxious or in any emotional distress was for them to tell us, to just message us via chat. So that was quite difficult. But what we want to do is continue with that research next year once we've got back to face-to-face delivery. This is very close to my heart right now because, maths and anxiety shouldn't be going together, but they are. So we would definitely continue with that following year. We are going to involve a higher number of students, probably all of our cohort that we've got here for both GCSE and functional skills, because that affects both of them, not just one. And what we're planning to do next. So obviously, as I said, insufficient finding on link between maths anxiety and misconceptions. We will definitely be continuing to do that. We want to look at misconceptions. So further on, misconceptions parts. So look at the concrete picture and abstract method. We also want to be looking at how environment helps or doesn't help with learners making mistakes, and why learners avoid none of the above option in multiple choice questions. Okay, and then read and exam type questions. So what do they actually read when they read those exam type questions? And just to finish off, I'm going to leave you with a lovely quote from one of the books we used for our research. And I've actually got it printed out and it's going to go on the wall in my office. So I keep reminding myself that although for me maths is easy, it's not as easy for everybody. Thank you. Any questions? We might actually have time to have abnormal questions rather than that questions.
Thank you so much. That was good and speedy at 8 minutes. Yeah, so keep an eye. It's lots of affirmation basically coming, Aga. Reading the question and understanding the question is often overlooked. And I'm going to leave you to answer that question from Ekaterina, which is, do the learners feel less anxious to seek help online? So if you want to pop into chat, Aga and Carl, and address that question from Ekaterina, while wheels turn and our final presentation, we are going to finish on time, so I'm not going to get in terrible trouble, is from Sheffield College. So we have Neil and I think Adam, who are going to tell us about going further. Over to you two.
Lynn, can you tell me what you've got on your timer, just so I know?
What you've got exactly 10 minutes. You can take 10 minutes and I'll give you a shout with 1 minute to go.
Perfect.
No worries. All yours.
Neil.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Neil Carruthers. It's my colleague Adam Clark. Thank you for listening to our drivel this afternoon. I'm sure it's not going to be as good as everybody else's. It's been fantastic to listen to what's going on. Next slide, please, sir. We looked at a flipped approach to engaging, supporting and building confidence. That was basically what it was at. And our hypothesis, next slide, please. I'm going to leave Adam lots of time on this. It was did using a more nuanced approach to undertaking weekly electronic diagnostic assessments prior to attendance at the meeting improve learner confidence, motivation and the learning experience. So that's basically what we looked at. It was a huge thing, but we thought that was the thing to go for. Next slide, please. So we had a 5-step approach to our delivery. Again, like everybody else, we were planning ahead for the lockdown before it happened. So we had a 5-step approach that we decided we were going to do. Step 1 was a video introduction. So that was the teachers from various from our team delivering what the topic of the week was going to be and explaining why it was important, what you would need to be working at particular grades and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. We then undertook our weekly diagnostic assessment. We did this using Google Forms. We went on to Google Suite as a college, which again made it easier for us to make the decision. We would have had a lot of discussion about Microsoft or Google. We were put on Google, so that's what we did. So we had a weekly diagnostic assessment, which was approximately 10 questions that was set, and the intention was that it was done before the class actually came into, and ideally as far in the front as we can to give the teacher time to analyse it. Next slide, please.
Can I just add, Neil? So one of the things that came from the diagnostic is obviously one of the great things about the Google Forms, immediate feedback. What we built into the Google Form was we took on Hegarty Maths 2 years ago. So part of this flipped approach was the students got immediate feedback. The questions they got wrong, it gave them a link to Hegarty and said, please go to this link on Hegarty before your lesson, because that's the flipped part. It was, the students had 6.5 days to kind of, work on those targets. So that's where the flipped part with the diagnostic came in.
Perfect. Step 3 was a starter activity, and again, it seems in a bit of an odd place to put the starter as the third activity, but this was basically with the intention of doing some of the underpinning skills that we know come up within the top 15. We use the top 15 methodology, which I know College of West Anglia uses and Grimsby came up with. So this was around activity that we weren't necessarily testing as an individual topic, rounding, approximation, estimation and things like that. And again, was based on a variety of different activity, some games, some worksheets, but all electronic. Step 4 was the topic activity. So again, the idea of topic activity was that the topic of this week is percentages. So it was some work for the learners to work through and hopefully identify potential misconceptions that we could then talk about in the next step, because the one that we didn't number was probably the more important one, which was the weekly online face-to-face session. So again, that gave us the option to be able to split groups up and work through from there. So the idea was that they would come to the lesson having done those things. It's a great plan. That's where it went slightly pear-shaped with us. And then finally, after the session, the end of session mini exam was released so that the learners could actually establish what they'd done. That was another Google form written by a different team than wrote the weekly diagnostic assessment. And again, that's one of our learning points from this year, because we had a slightly different focus from each team. They hadn't really sort of aligned quite how we'd want them to do, but it did work of a fashion. Next slide, please, Claire. So the initial learner voice. The students understood the concept of independent learning. They understood the value of the weekly diagnostic assessment. And then here's a comment from one of our learners. So in a minute. So personally, I think, oh my God, but then when I join the meet, I think I can achieve this. So again, that was not untypical of our learners on that one. Again, whilst looking at this, some more learner voice. So again, while they were initially demoralised by the topics and they got a low score, they could see how the feedback directed them to what they need, So sometimes it affects my motivation. I thought I knew this, but then I don't. But then you follow the link, the mini exam, you get more correct, so it's motivating. So that was a positive from that learner about that one. Another one. Okay, so our intervention itself is what we decided to do, and again we listened to Andy on this one, was not try and eat the whole elephant. We decided we were going to have an elephant sandwich instead. So our intervention was to look at the diagnostic assessment, stage 2, and see if we could adapt it to depending on the learner response, because our hypothesis as teachers when we talked about it was, the learners don't like getting low marks, and that's what's putting them off. So it's the low marks that's the issue for us. So we went for a branch diagnostic, at which point I'll hand over to Adam.
Thank you. Right, okay, so the branch diagnostic, the idea was that we got some feedback suggesting that some students were being really demotivated. These were all 10-question Google forms, and when you're getting 1 or 2 out of 10, then students were thinking, well, they can't even access the questions towards the end. But we needed to use a common Google form. Something that comes up for me to weigh up a lot is equality versus equity. So the equality there is everybody has exactly the same opportunity to answer the questions. Neil will talk about the feedback that came from using the branched version. But there is also the issue that, but we also needed to be differentiated by outcome, because again, this is where we get to equity. We were concerned that students could not access questions. It was demotivating. This was the first contact that they had with the lesson, with the topic. And we were looking at, it was about how how these were sold by the tutors as well. So it was looking at what can we do to kind of support everyone across the board. So because the low attaining students were accessing less questions in terms of answering them, in terms of understanding what they even were asking for, we determined that there was going to be an in-assessment trigger, and what it would do would be limiting the number of questions that the students could see, even though they were all in the same form. Psychologically, is 2 out of 5 sounds better than 2 out of 10? Possibly. So that was what we came from afterwards. What I've put in here is the technical part of how it worked, because some people might be interested. So the back end of it, it's a very complex diagram, but we'll get through it step by step. Everybody started, so it was the same Google form, everybody saw the same 3 questions to begin with. Okay. What happened then is that if they got question 2 wrong, okay, it turned into a 5-question quiz. And the way that happened was, if you got question 2 correct, it went on to another section with question 4 and 5. And regardless of what happened at that stage, it went to submit. So they answered 5 questions, submit, they got a mark. If they got the question 2 right, and bear in mind, we picked the question 2 as something that we couldn't get a false negative on. It was multiple choice, but it was so basic, there would be a concern about a student looking at grade 5 work if they couldn't get that. So it's what happened here seems weird. It skipped question 4 and 5, and it gave them a different question 4 and 5, although they were the same questions, but just the way that the Google form works, it jumped over them. Then it went on to the 6 questions up to 10, regardless of how they did on those 5. And then we put in a higher tier as well. So if the students got the question 10 wrong, again, that took them straight to submit. So they'd answered a 10 question quiz. If they got the question 10 right, then we chucked a higher tier question. Again, it's, we wanted to get that differentiation in, but bearing in mind that 95% of our students are grade 3s to 4s. There was a technical issue with this at the back end, something we hope Google will sort out. But I'll pass you back to Neil, who's got 1 minute and 31 seconds.
Thank you, Adam. Okay, so the learner response to the diagnostic was actually stranger than we'd imagined, And again, this is a learner quote. I don't mind getting things wrong. That's how you need to come to terms with things in life. I know I struggle. I underestimate what I'll get, so I'm not disappointed. It's how you look at things. You have to try. You have to push. That's a learner comment. The question we didn't ask, but then we did because we thought we've got to really ask this, and we did this qualitatively. Does it matter or affect your confidence if you get things wrong? Because we'd assumed that that was the big question, but that wasn't the one that we'd necessarily asked them. So the responses for it were quite interesting. The confident learners were less concerned about getting things wrong. They didn't mind. They saw being wrong as a good part of learning. The study program learners, the 16 to 18-year-olds, particularly at the lower levels, they seem to have more concern about getting it wrong. And again, typical voice, if you don't know it, you don't know it. Again, that was an adult type learner, as you can imagine. And then another one, as an adult learner, I can take the constructive criticism, whereas when I was younger, it would have knocked my confidence. I want to hear what I need to do better. That's not necessarily the same response when we get to a 16 to 18-year-old. We also got responses like, that's not fair. He got 10 questions, I only got 5. So it was really interesting that what we thought was going to be the issues wasn't what the learner had, a bit like I had, really. So we proved that we didn't prove, but it was interesting, and we will be continuing with it next year. And that's me at 10 minutes.
Yes, and actually 20 whole seconds to spare. So lots of people saying that they will, in fact, see you at the maths conference, Carl. So that's really good. Lee's going. Adam, getting comments from Lee, which is, I like this, scaffolding and stretch and challenge all in one. And Gail said, it's great you're asking questions to check on your assumptions there. We knew it was a whistle stop. So I'd just like to say thank you so much to all of the teams for presenting. You've been absolutely stunning. So a big round of applause for yourselves and also for everybody else.